In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the difference in takeaway between the iron and the driver. A couple of real simple points, but key to improve your quality of contact with both golf clubs. Make sure you check out this video. Welcome back to the TruGolf Academy. You've joined me, Jon Watts, today in our golf studio. And today's video, as I mentioned there in the intro, is actually going to be about the difference between an iron and a driver swing. And we're really going to be focusing about the first movement in the golf swing and how changing those parts is not only going to turn you into a good iron player, but a good driver of the golf ball as well. We do want a slight difference there in the angle of attack. This is really going to help that. If you're new to my channel and you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. The info for me just coming on the bottom of the screen right now. We're going to jump into this one. So what we're looking for different from an iron swing to a driver swing. So I've got a mid iron here, a 7-iron, and then my driver in hand. With the iron swing, I want a little bit more of a downward angle of attack. So the club should be swinging downwards into the golf ball, hitting the ball before it's hitting the ground. Whereas with the driver, I'm trying to get to my low point before I hit the golf ball, so the club is actually moving on an upward angle of attack. Now, quite a big part of that is just by changing ball position. And obviously with the driver, we're putting the ball on the tee. The biggest difference perhaps with the golf clubs is the length. Yes, there is a big difference on loft as well, but perhaps not going to affect what I'm going to be discussing here. So the length of golf club is a huge part, and that's going to affect the distance I am away from the ball and also my spine angle at address. So with an iron, I'm going to be a little bit more tilted forwards from my hips as the club is shorter and the ball on the ground. With the driver, I'm just going to stand just a touch taller. My spine angle will be a little bit more upright. And that does have an effect on the movement we're making. I'm going to really be focusing in here on the takeaway movement. So with an iron, what I'd expect to see, and what I do see with perhaps the world's best iron players, is they allow that trail elbow to fold in that first takeaway movement, and we start to see the club moving up. So there is a little bit more wrist cock than I would see perhaps with the world's best drivers of the golf ball. So I would expect or like to see in that first movement the trail elbow starting to soften and the wrist starting to cock a little bit more up. So we're actually creating a little bit more of an up and down movement. And as I mentioned there is that difference of setup. So my spine angle, the length of golf club will affect that, because as I tilt forwards more from my hips, my shoulders will start working a little bit more up and down in a vertical motion. Now obviously they are not vertical and they're not horizontal, it's somewhere between the two. We are rotating around that tilted axis. So my lead side is going a little bit more down, my trail side is going up as the club is starting to move upwards. With a drive, what I tend to see, and there are golfers who make the same movement, but I'd say with the best drivers in the ball, we tend to see a little bit more width early in their golf swing. So we tend to see actually the trail arm stay a little straight or straighter for a little longer. It starts to fold, but it folds a little bit later in the golf swing. So there's a bit more early width, keeping that club low for longer effectively. That does help me create this upward angle of attack, and it does help me create a little bit more speed as I've got more width here early in the golf swing. Now width is absolutely fine as long as it's not with a lot of lateral movement. So my head needs to still stay relatively centered, which is slightly behind the golf ball, as I create this width. So it's not width with the whole body shifting or the upper body moving off the ball. It's width here with my arms, and you can see my trail arm is actually a little straight for a little longer before it starts to fold, before the wrists start to cock. Whereas I would say with the iron, because of the length of it, because I'm a little bit more tilted forwards, and because I'm looking for that downward angle of attack, that actually the wrist would start to cock a little bit sooner up, and the trail arm would start to fold. There are a couple of similarities, a couple of key points I would want with both golf clubs. So what I'd like at our takeaway position, so P2, when the club is parallel to the ground, is I'd like the club head level with hands or slightly outside hands, not behind your hands. That same iron to driver. And I'd really like to see that leading edge of the golf club more matching or mirroring my spine angle. So I don't want to see the club face open or excessively closed, but I'd say the biggest fault I tend to see with either club is the club getting behind you and the face getting very open. So the similarities there, as I would like to have that leading edge of the golf club similar angle to my spine and the club just a little bit outside my hands. The change for me was the width, early width with the driver to a slightly earlier wrist set and right arm fold. Let's start with an iron. So let's hit one of each. I'm just going to rehearse that takeaway movement. You'll see I'm folding that trail arm and the wrists are starting to cock up earlier in my takeaway than they do with the driver. So that felt pretty solid. Again, I'm hitting there. I've just chosen mid-iron, so that's a 7-iron. You may find that the longer club's similar to driver, so our fairway is a hybrid. We still, again, get something closer to a driver swing where we have that early width. And early width, when we're generating power, is absolutely fine as long as I said, we're not getting a lot of lateral body movement. So if I quickly click driver now and hit one of those, and the only thing I'm trying to feel a little bit different to help my upward angle of attack and help me generate a little bit more speed is that early width. And you'll see I'm rehearsing the early width without my whole body moving off the golf ball. So I feel like that trail arm is actually straight a little longer before it starts to fold. Didn't feel the best strike, but it was down my target line, so I'll take it. I was aware there of a little bit more early width in my takeaway movement. Now, I haven't got dots actually on my iron head. I have got some on my driver, but I think what I'll see there, yeah, an upward angle of attack of 3.5 degrees. Whereas I know with an iron, I'm at least 5 degrees on the way down. So there's a big changing angle of attack now. Some of that is because I've moved the ball more forwards in my stance, some of that T-peg, but some of that is that takeaway move. So the trail arm softening, the wrist setting, just allow me to stay more centered, allow me to make sure that I'm getting the ball turf strike, whereas with a driver in my hand, I'm actually trying to get to my low point before I get to the golf ball, so the club is swinging more up. And having that early width can help me achieve that, help that club stay low to the ground for a little bit longer. It's also a good way of generating that little bit more speed that we're perhaps looking for off the tee when it's a power game and our iron is perhaps a little bit more of that accuracy game. If that video does help you, make sure you hit the thumbs up, share it with as many golfers as you can, and don't forget to subscribe.